The night was dark and heavy with clouds. The wind howled across the empty fields, shaking the dry corn stalks and rattling the windows of a small farmhouse. John, a middle-aged farmer, stood by his barn, checking his fences before the storm got worse. He was used to the quiet of the countryside, the sound of wind, the smell of soil, and the rhythm of hard work. But that night felt strange, like the air was waiting for something. Thunder rumbled deep and long, and lightning split the sky. John pulled his coat tighter around him. As he was about to return inside, a flash brighter than any lightning tore across the heavens. It was not a storm flash, no, it was blue, then red, then white, and it was moving. The object screamed through the air like a dying engine, trailing smoke and fire. John froze as it crashed into his far field, lighting up the night like day for a moment. The ground shook. Birds flew from the trees, dogs barked in the distance, and silence followed. John stared at the smoke rising from his land, heart pounding. He had seen meteors before, but nothing like that. Grabbing his flashlight and an old shotgun, he started walking toward the crash site. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, mixing with the smell of burning metal. As he got closer, he saw pieces of something scattered across the dirt. Glowing shards, strange metal unlike anything he'd seen. His boots sank into the wet ground. The air felt hot and electric. His flashlight beam caught movement, a figure crawling out from the wreckage. John froze, his breath catching in his throat. The figure was tall, too tall to be human, and its skin shimmered faintly even under the rain. It stumbled, coughing, holding something in its arms. John raised the shotgun but couldn't move. The figure fell to its knees, its voice trembling, a strange sound, soft and broken. Then he saw what it was holding. 2 small children wrapped in torn silver cloth, crying weakly. John lowered his weapon, confusion and fear battling inside him. The tall figure looked up. Its eyes glowed faintly blue, filled not with anger but with terror. It spoke again, words mixed with pain and a strange accent. "Help, please. Help them." John blinked, unsure if he was hearing right. He took a step closer. The creature's skin was smooth, its face marked with faint glowing lines like veins of light. Blood, or something like it, dripped from its side. The children, smaller and frail, clung to it. One of them let out a soft cry that sounded so heartbreakingly human that John felt his fear fade for a moment. Then the figure tried to stand, but fell again, one hand pressing into the mud. "Please, save them," it whispered. The words came out clearer now, almost perfect English. The rain washed over them, cold and relentless. John could see now, it wasn't some monster. It was a father, and he was dying. John's instinct screamed to run, to call someone, to protect himself. But his heart, the same heart that once buried a wife and raised a son alone, couldn't turn away. He lowered the shotgun completely and moved closer. The alien looked up again, eyes filled with tears. It placed the children down gently and bowed its head. "I will work." "As slave," he said, voice shaking. "Just save my family." John stood frozen. The storm thundered around them, the rain pouring like judgment from the sky. He didn't know what to say. 1,000 thoughts raced through his head: fear, doubt, pity. But then one simple truth rose above all. This was a parent, begging for his children's lives. John took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Don't move," he said softly, voice trembling. "I'm not going to hurt you." He knelt beside the alien father and touched one of the children's foreheads. The child's skin was cool, faintly glowing, but the heartbeat under his fingers was weak and fast. "We need to get them out of the rain," John said quietly, mostly to himself. He helped the father stand, though the alien leaned heavily on him. Together they stumbled back toward the barn, each step heavy and slow in the mud. The wind screamed around them, lightning flashing again and again. By the time they reached the barn, the storm was in full rage. John pushed the doors open and guided them inside. The alien collapsed on the hay, the children beside him. John quickly covered them with an old blanket, his hands shaking. He stared at them, these strange beings lying helpless under his roof, and felt something deep inside shift. He didn't understand who they were or where they came from. But he knew one thing: they were alive, scared, and needed help. And somehow on that stormy night he knew his life would never be the same again. Outside, thunder roared, but inside the barn, a fragile peace began. A human farmer and an alien father bound by fear. Hope and the smallest spark of trust. Rain poured harder. drumming against the barn roof like 1,000 tiny fists. John could barely hear himself think. Inside, the alien father lay on the floor, chest rising and falling in uneven gasps. His skin shimmered faintly under the lantern light, silver blue and streaked with dirt. The two small children huddled beside him, their thin fingers clutching at their father's torn coat. John knelt beside them, unsure what to do. His hands were trembling. He had never seen anything like this before, real aliens right here in his barn. He wanted to help, but fear sat like a stone in his chest. What if someone saw? What if the government came? Still, when one of the children whimpered, his heart softened. They were just scared and cold, nothing more. The alien father slowly lifted his head. His voice was hoarse and quiet. "Please," he whispered again, his words shaking. Don't let them take my children," John frowned. "Who's trying to take them?" The alien's eyes glowed faintly as he tried to speak. "Soldiers," he said weakly. "My people, they follow orders. I refuse to kill humans. Now they hunt me. My family," he coughed, a strange silver liquid staining his lips. "They destroyed our ship. We ran, please. I will work for you, serve you, just protect them." The words, "I will work for you," made John's stomach twist. The alien sounded desperate, too desperate. John didn't want a slave, he wanted to understand. He grabbed an old towel and wiped the blood or whatever it was from the man's face. "I don't want you to work for me," he said softly. "Just stay quiet, rest, you're safe here." But the alien didn't believe him. He pushed himself up onto his knees, trembling. The children clung to him. "No safe," he said. "They come. Always come, they burn, they kill." He looked up at John, eyes full of terror and guilt. "Please, make me your slave. Then they will not kill me. They will see I serve human. Maybe they let us live." John felt a lump in his throat. The rain outside grew louder, the wind howling through the cracks of the old barn. The idea that someone could beg to be a slave, it broke something inside him. He reached out, placing a hand gently on the alien's shoulder. "You don't need to bow to me," he said quietly. "You just need to stay alive. For them." He nodded toward the children. The alien's shoulders shook. He lowered his head, silent tears mixing with the rainwater on his face. "You are kind," he whispered. "Kind. Like the ones I could not kill." John stared at him, trying to understand. "You mean during the war?" The alien nodded. "I was soldier. We were told humans are dangerous, monsters, but when I saw them, I saw fathers, mothers, children. Like mine, I couldn't do it." He took a deep breath and looked toward his sleeping kids. "They called me traitor. Burned our home. We ran." His voice cracked, trembling with pain and exhaustion. "I can't run anymore." For a moment, silence filled the barn. Only the sound of rain and distant thunder remained. John's mind raced. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew danger was close. He turned and walked to the door, peeking outside. The storm had slowed, but far off in the distance, faint lights flickered in the sky. Search drones moving like fireflies. He closed the door quickly and bolted it shut. "You're not going anywhere tonight," he said. "You'll stay here. I'll find something for the kids to eat." The alien looked up, confused. "You help us?" John nodded. "Yes, you came here asking for help, so that's what I'll do." The alien stared at him for a long time, as if he didn't believe humans could be so kind. Finally, he bowed his head again. "Then I swear," he said slowly, his hand pressed to his chest. "My life belongs to you," John sighed. "No," he said gently. "Your life belongs to your children, and right now keeping them alive is what matters." He turned to grab a bucket of clean water and some bread from the shelf. The two alien children watched him closely, their wide eyes glowing faintly in the dark. One of them reached out and touched his arm, curious but afraid. Their skin was cool and smooth like polished stone. John smiled faintly. "You don't have to be scared. I won't hurt you." The child blinked, then smiled back. A shy, small smile that hit John harder than any weapon ever could. Outside, the rain finally began to fade. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of something waiting, of danger creeping closer. The searchlights were moving faster now, sweeping the sky above his field. John looked at the alien father and whispered, "You need to rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do." The alien nodded weakly, finally lying back down beside his children. John blew out the lantern and sat near the door, shotgun across his lap, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, soldiers, human or alien, he didn't yet know, were coming. And before the next sunrise, his quiet farm would become the center of something far greater than he could ever imagine. Morning came slow and gray. The storm had passed, leaving behind a field soaked in silence. Mist rolled across the farmland, wrapping everything in a ghostly calm. John stepped outside the barn, his boots sinking in the soft mud. His mind was heavy. The night felt like a dream, but the truth was right behind him. Inside his barn, 3 lives from another world were hiding. He walked back in quietly. The alien father was still asleep, his chest rising weakly. The 2 children were curled beside him, their glowing skin faint beneath the old blankets. For a moment, John just watched them. They didn't look dangerous. They didn't look like the monsters people imagined in stories. They looked like any family trying to survive. John fetched some bread, milk, and water from the farmhouse. When he entered again, one of the children opened its eyes, bright blue like sunlight through ice. It blinked at him and tilted its head curiously. John smiled softly and placed the food near them. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You're safe here." The alien father slowly woke up, startled at first, then relaxed when he saw John. "You still here?" he said weakly. "I thought, maybe you tell soldiers." John shook his head. "I'm not that kind of man. But we need to be careful. Someone might have seen the crash." The alien nodded, sitting up with effort. "My name is Kale," he said after a pause. His accent was thick, but his words were clear. "These are my children, Lyra and Tav." He touched their heads gently, pride and sorrow in his eyes. "We thank you," John nodded back. "Name's John, and you don't need to thank me. Just rest." Kale tried to stand but stumbled. John caught him before he fell. "You're not going anywhere until you heal," John said firmly. "You're bleeding again." Kale looked down at the silver wound on his side. The glowing liquid had soaked through the bandage John had wrapped the night before. "It is poison," Kyle muttered. "Metal burned from ship. Will not kill me fast, but—" He didn't finish. His face said enough. John sighed. "Let me see what I can do." He rummaged through an old medical box and carefully cleaned the wound again. Kale winced but didn't move. "Why were they chasing you?" John asked quietly. Kale's eyes darkened. "Because I refused to fight." He looked toward his children, his voice breaking. "My people wanted war. I saw humans not as enemies, but as same. They called me traitor. I stole a ship and ran, but they found me. They never stop." John sat back, stunned. "You risked your life to protect humans?" Kyle nodded. "Not all humans," he said softly. "Just the idea of them. The way they love. The way they hope." The words hit John harder than he expected. He thought about his wife long gone and his son now grown and working far from home. Hope. Love. Simple words, but powerful ones. Before John could reply, a faint hum filled the air. It grew louder, a pulsing, mechanical sound. Kale's head snapped up, his eyes wide with fear. "Drones," he whispered. John ran to the window and peeked outside. Small black dots moved slowly over the horizon. Government drones searching the area. His heart jumped. "They're scanning the crash site," he said. "They'll come here next." Kale tried to stand again. "We go now." John turned sharply. "You can't. You'll die out there." Kyle looked at his children, then at John. "If they find me here, they kill you too." John clenched his jaw. He knew Kale was right. If the military discovered he'd hidden aliens, they'd arrest him without question. But the thought of sending them back out into danger was worse. He grabbed a tarp and started covering the barn windows. "Nobody's dying here," he said. "We'll hide you." Kyle watched, confusion in his tired eyes. "Why?" John paused. "Because I've lost enough in my life. I won't watch someone else lose their family too." He pulled old hay bales, covered the broken boards, and rolled barrels in front of the door. The barn grew darker but safer. Kale helped as much as he could, though his hands trembled. The children followed John, quietly mimicking his movements like it was a game. When they finished, John pointed to a small trapdoor under the hay. "It leads to a cellar. My father built it during the war to hide supplies. You'll stay there if anyone comes." Kyle stared at him, disbelief softening into gratitude. "You protect us like your own," he said. "Why?" John gave a small, tired smile. "Because maybe someone somewhere would have done the same for me." The hum outside grew louder, closer. They could see faint red lights flashing through the cracks of the barn walls. Cale gathered his children, holding them close. "If they come," he whispered, "I fight." John loaded his shotgun and stood near the door. "If they come," he said quietly, "we both do." The lights passed by slowly, shadows gliding across the field. John held his breath. The sound faded after a long minute until only the wind remained. Cale lowered his head, trembling. "Thank you," he whispered. John nodded, lowering his weapon. "We're not safe yet," he said, "but we'll survive the night." As dawn broke, a weak ray of sunlight slipped through the barn roof. It touched the alien children's faces, making their skin shimmer like glass. For the first time, John didn't see invaders or strangers. He saw life, fragile, frightened, and worth protecting. He looked at Cale and said softly, "We'll keep this place hidden. No one will find you here." Kyle's eyes filled with tears. "Then this barn," he whispered, "is now our home." Outside, the mist began to lift, and with it, the beginning of something far greater than either man could understand. The next morning was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made the hairs on John's neck stand up. He stood by the window, sipping coffee, staring out over his fields. The crash site still smoked faintly in the distance, now surrounded by government trucks and men in black uniforms. They moved with purpose, scanning the ground with strange machines. Drones buzzed overhead, slicing through the morning fog like angry hornets. John's hands tightened around the mug. He had hoped they wouldn't come this far, but deep down he knew it was only a matter of time. Inside the barn, Cale sat with his children. His wounds were healing slowly, but the pain still showed in his face. The kids had stopped trembling whenever they heard footsteps, but fear still lingered in their wide, glowing eyes. John entered quietly, forcing a smile. "They're out there," he said softly. "Search teams. I can see at least 6 trucks from here." Cale's expression hardened. "They come for me." "Maybe," John replied, "or maybe they're just checking the crash. But we won't take chances." He pointed toward the trap door hidden under the hay. "You stay down there until I tell you it's safe." Kyle nodded slowly. "If they find you helping me," John cut him off, "then I'll deal with it." His voice was firm. "I'm not letting them take your kids." Kyle looked at him, really looked at him. His lips trembled and he whispered, "You are not soldier, but you fight like one." John smiled faintly. "Used to fight storms, not wars. But maybe this one's both." He helped Cale and the children down into the cellar, covering the trap door with hay and old boards. The barn fell silent again, only the faint hum of machines echoing from outside. John took a deep breath, wiped his hands on his jeans, and walked toward the front gate. Within minutes, the first jeep rolled up the dirt road. Soldiers in dark gray uniforms stepped out, helmets reflecting the morning light. One of them, a tall man with sharp eyes, approached the fence. "Morning, sir," the soldier said. "We're looking for anyone who might have seen a crash last night. Reports say something went down around this area." John forced a calm smile. "I heard the noise," he said. "Scared the cows half to death. Looked like it hit near the old creek bed." The soldier nodded. "You live here alone?" John hesitated for only a heartbeat. "Yeah, just me." The soldier studied him carefully, eyes scanning the barn, the tractor, the muddy ground. Another soldier walked around the property, holding a metal detector that beeped faintly near the fence line. John's pulse quickened. He knew there were fragments of the alien ship scattered in the dirt. "Mind if we look around your barn?" the officer asked casually. John felt his heart sink. He wanted to say no, but that would only make things worse. "Sure," he said, forcing a shrug. "Ain't much to see but hay and tools." They stepped inside. The smell of hay mixed with oil and metal filled the air. John's palms were sweating, but he kept his expression calm. The soldiers' boots thudded on the wooden floor as they looked around. One of them tapped on the boards near the trapdoor. Once, twice. John's heart nearly stopped, but then a sneeze, soft, small, and helpless, and came from below. The soldier froze. "What was that?" John laughed quickly, too loudly. "Rats, big ones too. Been trying to get rid of them for years." The soldier frowned, eyes narrowing. Sounded like a kid. John stepped forward, blocking his view. "You think I'm hiding kids in my barn?" He forced a laugh again, this one harsher. "I barely feed myself." The soldier stared at him for a long, tense moment. Finally, he turned away. "All right, sir. We'll keep moving. But if you see anything, anyone, you contact us immediately." John nodded. Of course. They left after a few more minutes, the sound of engines fading down the road. John stood still, not moving, until he was sure they were gone. Then he rushed back to the trapdoor, pulling away the hay. Cale and the children looked up, eyes wide with fear. John exhaled, half laughing, half shaking. You almost got us caught, he whispered. Kyle bowed his head. I am sorry. My son. He tried not to sneeze. John smiled weakly. It's all right. They're gone. For now. He sat down on the floor, wiping the sweat from his forehead. The air was thick and heavy. For the first time, he realized just how far this had gone. He wasn't just helping a stranger anymore. He was protecting a fugitive family from a war that wasn't even his. Cale climbed out of the cellar, placing a hand on John's shoulder. You risked everything, he said softly. For me. For my children. John looked at him, eyes tired but steady. No father should beg to save his kids, he said quietly. Not on my land. Not while I'm alive. Cale's eyes glowed brighter. Not from fear this time, but from something else, respect, gratitude, maybe even love. Outside, the sound of thunder rolled again, not from the sky this time, but from engines. The soldiers were still nearby, and John knew they would return. But now it wasn't just about hiding aliens anymore. It was about standing up for what was right. As dusk began to fall, John looked out over his field one last time. The sky burned orange and gold, and for a brief moment he forgot the danger. He only saw a father protecting his children, and another man choosing humanity over fear. And in that quiet space between heartbeats, John made himself a promise. No matter what came next, he would protect them. Even if it cost him everything. The sun had barely risen when the first crack in their fragile peace appeared. John was out in the field pretending to fix his tractor, while Cale and his children stayed hidden inside the barn. The air smelled of damp earth and fuel, and the silence pressed heavy on everything. But peace never lasted long on that farm anymore, not with the government searching and neighbors asking questions. Old man Carter, John's closest neighbor, had started showing up more often. He was a nosy man, suspicious by nature, always looking for gossip to feed the small town. That morning, John saw him standing by the fence, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Morning. Carter, John called, forcing a calm smile. Morning, Carter said slowly, his tone cold. Heard strange noises coming from your barn last night. Looked like lights in there, too. John felt his throat tighten. Storm messed with my power lines. Probably flickering lights from the generator. Carter's eyes narrowed. Funny, the power company said there weren't any outages. He leaned forward on the fence. You hiding something, John? John chuckled, pretending not to care. Just my broken tractor and a few secrets from my past. But Carter didn't laugh. He spat on the ground and walked away, muttering under his breath. John watched him go, unease crawling up his spine. Inside the barn, Cale was repairing a broken communicator with scraps from his crashed ship. We can send message soon, he said quietly. Maybe find other survivors. Maybe find safe place, John frowned. Won't that lead them here? Cale shook his head. No signal strong enough? Just small one. Whisper in the dark. John wasn't convinced, but he said nothing. Cale's children were laughing softly, playing with old farm tools as if they were toys. Seeing them smile made John's heart ache. He hadn't seen such innocence in a long time. That night, John barely slept. Every creak, every gust of wind made him think of soldiers returning. Around midnight, the sound of tires crunching on gravel jolted him awake. He looked through the window, flashlights, voices, footsteps. Open up! Someone shouted. John's heart dropped. Soldiers again? No. He recognized the voice. Carter. And he wasn't alone. John rushed to the barn. Cale! He whispered harshly. Hide. Someone's here. Kyle jumped to his feet, pulling his children close. They found us? I don't know, John said. But it's bad. Outside, Carter was yelling, I told you he's got something in there. I saw lights, I heard voices. Behind him stood two armed soldiers. One of them raised a flashlight toward the barn door. John stepped outside, forcing himself between them and the barn. What's going on? He demanded. Carter sneered. You tell me. You've been acting strange since the crash. I saw movement last night. You think I'm stupid? One of the soldiers stepped forward. Sir, we need to inspect your property. Step aside. John's hands trembled, but he didn't move. You've already searched once. Found nothing. What gives you the right to come back? The soldier's eyes were cold. A report from a civilian witness. John's anger boiled. That civilian's a drunk and a liar. Carter's face turned red. You calling me a liar, John? Yeah, John said. And a coward, too. The soldier raised his hand. Enough, step aside. John's mind raced. If they entered the barn, they'd find the trap door. There'd be no hiding this time. His pulse pounded in his ears. There's nothing inside, he said. Just tools and hay. You want to see? Fine. He pushed open the door himself, walking in first to block their view. His eyes darted toward the trap door, covered still. But one of the soldiers stepped in behind him, scanning with a heat detector. A faint beep. The soldier froze. There's someone here. John's blood turned cold. No! That's just the furnace, and it's old, always hot. But before he could say more, a sound came from below. A small, frightened whimper. Cale's daughter. The soldier turned his rifle toward the floor. There, he shouted. Everything happened in seconds. Cale burst from the trapdoor, shielding his children, his body glowing faintly as he raised his hands. Stop, he shouted. Don't shoot. The soldiers stumbled back, aiming their weapons. Target confirmed. Alien life form. John stepped between them, shouting, Don't shoot! He's not dangerous. But Carter was already running back toward his truck, yelling into a phone. I told you. He's hiding one. He's helping it. One of the soldiers grabbed John and pushed him to the ground. You're under arrest for aiding an enemy entity. John struggled. He's not the enemy. He's a father. Cale looked torn, his glowing eyes full of pain. He turned to his children, whispering, Hide. Then slowly he raised his hands higher. Take me, he said softly. Not them. John's throat burned. No. Cale's gaze met his. You saved my children once. Now I save you. Before the soldiers could react, Cale's body flared with light, a sudden blinding glow that filled the barn. The soldiers shielded their eyes, stumbling back. When the light faded, Cale stood still, hands still raised. He didn't resist when they cuffed him. As they dragged him out, one of the children screamed. John reached for them, tears streaming down his face. Don't worry, I'll get him back, he whispered. The soldiers pushed him into the dirt beside the barn. Carter stood watching, smug and satisfied. Should have kept to your own kind, John, he said coldly. John glared up at him, his voice trembling with fury. One day, he said, you'll see who the real monsters are. The trucks drove away, engines roaring into the night. Cale was gone. The children cried in the shadows of the barn, clutching each other. John sat in the mud, fists clenched, watching the taillights fade. He had protected them for days, and in one moment of betrayal, he had lost everything. But deep in his chest, beneath the fear and grief, something new began to burn, rage, and a promise that this wasn't over. The world had changed overnight. What began as one man's arrest in a quiet farming town became a storm that swept across every screen. Every network, every home. Someone had filmed it, and the soldiers dragging Cale away, the glowing figure begging them not to harm his children. The farmer shouting, he's not the enemy and he's a father. The video hit the net before sunrise. By morning, millions had seen it. John didn't know any of that yet. He sat in a cold cell at the county station, bruised and silent. His hands shook, not from fear but from anger. They'd taken Cale. They'd left his children alone, terrified, hidden under the hay where he'd found them crying when the soldiers were gone. Before they took him, John had managed to call his son Daniel, told him just enough to get there fast. The rest he couldn't explain. Who would believe it anyway? The cell door creaked open. Sheriff Miller, an old friend, stepped inside. He looked tired, holding a stack of papers. John, he sighed, you're in deep trouble. Harboring a classified life form? That's not something I can ignore. John met his eyes. He wasn't a threat. He was running for his family's life. Miller shook his head. Doesn't matter. Orders are orders. John leaned forward. You ever seen a man beg to be a slave, Sheriff? You ever seen a father cry just to save his kids? The sheriff said nothing. He just turned and walked away. But before he left, his voice softened. Something's happening out there, John. People saw that video. You're trending. The government's in panic mode. When the door closed, John sat back slowly. Video? He hadn't realized anyone was recording. Hours later, Daniel arrived. Younger, sharper, the kind of man who spoke fast and thought faster. Dad, he said, his voice low. You're all over the news. They're calling you a hero, John blinked. Hero? I'm sitting in a jail cell. Daniel grinned faintly. Yeah, well, heroes usually start there. He slid his phone through the bars. On the screen, the video played. Cale kneeling in the mud, soldiers surrounding him, the faint shimmer of rain and flashlight beams. The caption read, Alien father begs human to save his children. Humanity responds. The internet had exploded. Some called Cale a monster, but more, far more, called him a father. Hashtags flooded every corner of the web. He begged to protect, save Kyle, humanity first. HFY moments. People cried on camera. Others protested in the streets. Artists painted murals of Cale holding his children. For the first time, humans weren't afraid of an alien. They were angry at their own kind for how he was treated. Daniel whispered, They can't hide this anymore. People are demanding answers. John's throat tightened. And the children? They're safe, Daniel said. I took them to the old storm shelter behind the mill. They trust me. They keep asking for you. John exhaled slowly, relief washing through him. Good. They need to stay hidden. Meanwhile, miles away in a high-security facility, Cale sat chained in a white room. His eyes were dim, his body weak. Scientists whispered behind glass walls, afraid to get too close. But Cale didn't fight. He only asked one question over and over. Are they safe? No one answered. Then something unexpected happened. One of the guards, a young recruit, slipped him a small device, a tablet showing a news feed. On it, he saw himself, kneeling in the mud, begging John to save his family. He saw the protests, the art, the humans marching with signs that said, We see you, Cale. Tears glowed on his cheeks. Humanity, he whispered, you see truth. Back in the town, John's name became a symbol. Journalists came to his gate. Preachers quoted his words in sermons. Children in schools wrote essays about the farmer who stood between two worlds. But John didn't care about fame. He just wanted Cale free. That night, Daniel returned to the station again, his face lit with urgency. Dad, listen. There's a rally tomorrow in the capital. Thousands of people are showing up. They're demanding Cale's release. You need to speak. John hesitated. Speak? I'm a farmer, not a politician. Daniel smiled. You're not speaking as a politician. You're speaking as a man who remembered what it means to be human. The next day they released John. Too much public pressure to keep him locked away. Cameras flashed the moment he stepped outside. He ignored the noise, walking straight to the microphone set up in front of the courthouse. Reporters shouted questions, but John spoke over them. His voice was firm, simple, and honest. You all saw what happened, he said. That man, Kyle, didn't come here to fight. He came to beg for mercy, and we answered with guns. But when he looked at me, I didn't see an alien. I saw a father. I saw myself. The crowd went silent. If being human means turning away from that, John continued, his voice rising, then maybe we forgot what humanity means. Cheers erupted. People began chanting Cale's name. Drones streamed the moment live across the planet. That night, the government made a quiet announcement. Cale would be transferred, not executed. Investigations into his capture were under review. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was hope. Back in the shelter, Cale's children watched the broadcast on an old radio Daniel had found. When they heard John's voice, they smiled and held each other close. And somewhere, deep inside that sterile lab, Cale closed his eyes and whispered, The human farmer kept his promise. For the first time since the crash, the stars outside didn't seem so far apart. Because one man's mercy had awakened something larger than war. It had awakened humanity itself. The day Cale was released, the sky looked different, clearer, brighter, as if even the heavens had been waiting for this moment. The government tried to keep it quiet, but news travels faster than any drone. By noon, hundreds of people gathered near the facility gates, holding banners that read, Mercy is strength, and He begged, we heard. John stood at the front, hat in hand, his heart thudding with every second. He hadn't slept for days, but his eyes burned with purpose. Daniel stood beside him, holding a camera to stream the moment live to the world. Then the gates opened. 2 guards walked out first, followed by Cale, thinner, paler, but alive. His once glowing skin was dull from confinement, but his eyes still held that quiet strength John would never forget. The crowd gasped, some in awe, some in tears. Kyle stopped for a moment, blinking at the sunlight as though he hadn't seen it in years. When his gaze found John, he froze. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then he took a trembling step forward. John moved too, without words, without thought. They met in the middle, under the shadow of the facility walls, and for a moment it didn't matter who was human or alien. Cale bowed his head low, whispering, "You kept your promise." John placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did too. You survived." The crowd cheered, cameras flashed, and somewhere in the noise the alien children came running. Lyra and Tov threw themselves into their father's arms, their glowing faces pressed against his chest. Cale's shoulders shook as he held them, whispering in his own tongue, soft sounds of love and relief. Even the guards looked away, unable to stop their own tears. Later, when the chaos settled, the government made an unexpected move. They didn't arrest John again. Instead, they asked him to speak, to help form the first contact program between humans and Cale's people. It was a risk, but John accepted. He didn't care about politics. He just wanted to build something that might keep others from suffering as Cale had. Weeks passed. The world changed. Where people once feared aliens, now they built bridges of understanding. Cities displayed banners reading, "No more war between stars." Schools taught children about compassion instead of conflict. And out, on John's small farm, the barn that had once been a hiding place became something else. A symbol. Visitors came from around the world to see it. Reporters, scientists, even children brought flowers to lay by the door. Someone painted a mural on its old wooden wall, Cale kneeling, John lifting him up. Beneath it were the words, "Different worlds, same hearts." John and Cale worked side by side again, this time not in fear, but in peace. They rebuilt the damaged field, planted new crops, and raised a shared home near the barn. The alien children grew fast, helping Daniel with machines and teaching him their language. The farm was alive again, filled with laughter, strange songs, and the hum of alien tools blending with human tractors. Sometimes at sunset, John would sit on the porch with Cale. The horizon burned gold and red, the colors mixing like their 2 worlds finally learning to share the same sky. "Back on my world," Cale said one evening. "The sky turns green when a storm comes. We feared that color. But now, I look at your red sunsets and think maybe fear can become beauty." John smiled. "Funny," he said. "We feared you once too." They sat in silence after that, both men understanding more than words could ever say. But not everyone accepted the new peace easily. There were still those who hated, who called Cale a danger, who said humans were weak for forgiving. When reporters asked John what he thought of them, he answered simply, "If kindness is weakness, then maybe it's the strongest thing we've got left." Months later, the world watched again as something miraculous happened. Kyle's people, now aware of his survival, sent a signal, not of war, but of peace. A massive ship appeared in Earth's orbit, shining like a second moon. From it came a message broadcast across every frequency. "We see what humanity did for one of our own. We come not to conquer, but to learn." Crowds cheered across continents. The stars no longer meant fear, they meant connection. On that night, John stood outside his farmhouse, looking up at the glowing ship. Cale stood beside him, his children laughing nearby, chasing fireflies. "You ever think it would come to this?" John asked quietly. Cale shook his head. "No, but maybe this is what your world needed. A reminder." John smiled faintly. "Of what?" "That mercy," Cale said, looking at him, "is the highest form of strength." The 2 men stood together, watching as the sky shimmered with starlight and the ship's gentle hum filled the air. Somewhere deep inside, John thought of that first night, the storm, the pleading words, the trembling voice saying, "Make me your slave, just save my family." And now here they were, no slaves, no masters, just two fathers, two friends, proof that compassion could change galaxies. As the stars brightened above, Cale turned to John and said softly, "You didn't just save my family, you saved something greater." John nodded, eyes glistening. "Yeah," he said quietly, "maybe we saved each other." And under that shared sky, humanity and the stars finally spoke the same language, not with words, but with understanding. The night was no longer silent, no longer afraid. It was alive, full of hope, full of life, and full of the promise that mercy had built a bridge between worlds that would never fall again.